There you are. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much then. Okay, so let us start here, students. Today we have a very interesting practice to make together. What we're going to do is that we are going to use the simulator, okay? We're going to use the simulator for us to practice what we have been discussing in the previous classes. Let me access them my my simulator here, and also I have here a number. Give me a second here to look for it. How to prepare. Here, fantastic. Here we have it. So here as well. And now let me share my screen again. There you are. So as I told you last time, if you calculate more or less how much time you have in order to respond every single one of these questions in the listening section, you have approximately 1 minute. That's the reason why, as you can see, what I have done is that I have prepared this chronometer here, and this chronometer is going to sound every single minute, okay? So when we get into the questions for the reading passages, not the reading, excuse me, for the listening passages, and also for the conversations that we're going to listen as material for us to perform on this section, we're going to use this chronometer to indicate to you that we have finalized for the time you have in order to respond to a question. Because the way that we're going to practice is that every single one of you is going to respond to one question for the reading, excuse me, for the lecture or for the conversation that we are going to listen, okay? So as we have 6 questions per lecture and 5 questions per conversation, I think that all of you are going to be able to respond to one question. Of course, anyways, you have to take a notebook or some sort of sheet of paper with you and to write down your responses there so that we can compare them later, right? But this is the mechanism we're going to use, okay? So just want to have this already prepared. Fantastic as it is. Okay, here we have it. And also, yes. Okay, fantastic. There we are. Very good. I'm going to stop it. Okay, let's go. So please take your piece of paper with you. Make sure that your headphones are well connected with enough volume, and let us listen to the first lecture for us to practice this section, okay? We have quiz mode, and let's go. All right, fantastic. So in this case, let's go with the first exercise, okay? So please take your piece of paper, take your pencil, take your notes, and then one by one, you're going to respond to the questions that are going to be released for this particular material. Let's go.
Listen to part of a lecture in a business class.
So we've been talking about retail stores. Stores that sell items to individual customers, to the general public. Retail markets are very competitive, with many different stores selling the same things. This city alone has something like 20 grocery stores, 10 hardware stores, a half dozen drugstores. You get the idea. So how do all these stores stay competitive? How can each store stay at the top of its game and get as many customers as possible? Well, retail customers care a lot about value, getting the most bang for their buck. So retail stores compete with each other by trying to offer the best deals on popular items. A certain kind of very cheap item is called a loss leader. A loss leader is something a store sells at below cost, for less than they paid for it, to attract customers into the store. Take, an electronics store. It might buy a popular brand of battery from the manufacturer for $3 a pack. Then they might sell the packs of batteries to customers for just $1 each. When customers hear how cheap the batteries are, they'll come to the store that's selling them. The idea behind a loss leader is that customers will come to the store to buy that really cheap item. And then they'll stay in that store and buy other things that are being sold at a profit. Say, a grocery store is selling bread below cost. It's losing money on the bread, but with any luck, the people who come to buy the bread will also buy other groceries and other goods like, toilet paper, garbage bags. The store loses a little money on its loss leader, the bread, but with all the other things that customers buy when they're getting the bread, The store could be making a killing. Lots of profit to offset just a little loss. Now, loss leader items have a few common characteristics. First, a loss leader will be a popular item, usually something that people need to buy again and again, like the batteries or bread I mentioned, or maybe soap or napkins. That way people remember what the normal price is. They see the much lower price of the loss leader and they know it's a steal. Next, loss leaders are almost never at the front of a store. You see, store managers want the customers to find and purchase other more profitable items while they shop for loss leaders. So, if an item is sold under cost, it'll be deep inside the store, maybe even a little out of the way. Finally, stores very often put a limit on how many loss leader items a customer can buy. If you've ever seen something on sale with a sign that says, maybe, limit 2 per customer, or something like that, the store is probably losing money on that item. It's a loss leader. Using loss leaders is a very old, proven marketing tactic, but it can still be controversial. Some stores that use loss leaders a lot are accused of predatory pricing. Predatory pricing is usually done by large companies that own national chains of stores. These stores have a lot of money on reserve, so they can afford to sell lots of popular items at a loss for long periods of time. Slowly, all of the other competitors in the market get buried. They lose their customers because the customers go to the bigger store for the better deal. Then, once all of the smaller competitors are gone, the bigger company raises the prices again, sometimes really high, so the customers feel like they're taken advantage of. Almost everybody loses. The customers, the competitors. The big store wins in some ways, but there can be public backlash, and in some cases, legal problems. Stores that use loss leaders in a predatory way can be sued, even sometimes shut down by the government. Still, if loss leaders are used responsibly, they're very good for retailers and consumers. Consumers can get some of the things they need the most at a really good price. And retailers have a way to get customers' attention. And money, even in a very competitive market.
Okay, there you are. Fantastic. So now please let us go and respond to the questions for this one, okay? The way that you're going to respond is that one by one, according to how I can look at your profiles here on my screen, you're going to respond to these questions, okay? So the first one is going to be for Alexander, right? Alexander, you're the first student that I can see on my screen. So please, all of you, you can read this one anyways and respond it by yourself. Take a sheet of paper and write down what would be the correct answer in your opinion, okay? So, but for Alexander, you have to say this one aloud so that I can, of course, help you, okay? So please start thinking, reading, and responding to the question now. There you are. Okay. So Alexander, please, what is the correct response here? Can you listen to me, dear Alexander? Are you over there? Yes, I guess Alexander has some problems. Guadalupe, please could you help me with this one? Which one would be the correct response here?
The number 3.
All right, number 3. Let's go. Fantastic. Let's move on to the next one. We're going to check their responses later, okay? So this one is going to be for Paulina. So please, Paulina, here you have your minutes. Start reading and responding now. All right, there you are. So Paulina, what is the correct answer here?
I'm not sure. Number 3 and
Okay.
number 3 and I don't know, number 2.
All right. 3 and 2. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Paulina. Let's go with next question. Lucia, this is going to be for you. Okay, so please, here you have your minutes. Start reading and responding now. By the way, if you finish, if you know what the response is before the time is over, say it, okay? Not necessary to employ the entire minute. There you are. Lucia, which one is the correct answer here?
I think it's number 1.
All right, number 1. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lucia. Let's go with Natalie. Natalie, this is yours. Remember, you are not required to use the entire minute. If you want, here you have it. Okay, your time is over. Natalie, which one would be the correct answer here?
I'm not sure. I would say number 3.
All right, number 3. Thank you very much. And let's go with the next one. Okay, Alexander, are you there? Can you listen to me, dear Alexander? Okay, so I guess Alex is having some troubles. It's okay. So Guadalupe, this is going to be for you again. All right. Start please reading and responding now. Awesome. There you are. So, dear Guadalupe, which one would be the answer here?
Number 4.
Number 4. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Number 4. All right. Okay, so Paulina, this is going to be for you. This is, if you remember, basically a purpose question. And if you remind what we have been discussing, purpose questions always give you the chance to listen again to one part of the listening, right? So please let us go and listen together to this particular recording in order for you to respond later to this question. Why does the professor say this? Let's go.
Listen again to part of the lecture. Then answer the question.
Well, retail customers care a lot about value, getting the most bang for their buck. So retail stores compete with each other by trying to offer the best deals on popular items.
Why does the professor say this?
Well, retail customers care a lot about value.
Okay, so having listened to that, dear Paulina, which one would be the correct answer? Start reading and responding now.
And number 3.
Okay. Thank you very much, dear Paulina. There you are. Let's move to next question. Okay, so now we have finished with that. Let's check out the answers if you agree with me. Let's see if they were right or wrong. Okay, we're gonna see. Let's go to the first question and let's check out if your responses were correct. Okay, so question number 1. Fantastic. So what is the main purpose of the talk? And here the response correct, or excuse me, the correct response, not response correct, but the correct response was number 3. And I think that the person who got this one did it very well, because to show how retail stores used loss leaders as sales tactic was actually the correct response, right? And why was this correct response? Remember that I talked to you, right, about when you receive this type of question, that is the main idea question, always think about what is that idea that has framed all discussion and data, has made everything have listened a whole, right? Not just unconnected information. And if you think about it, what makes it a unify, and as I told you, what makes it a whole, it's basically this idea that retail stores use this technique, loss leaders, in order to sell more goods to the customers they have, right? Because the professor is talking about this idea from the beginning until the end, right? And this is what unifies and frames and cierra all the information, discussion, and data that the professor provokes, right? What about the second question? Okay, so in this case, the correct responses were number 3 and 4. The person who responded in this case got 1, very, very good. And the other one was in this case, the number 4. So the question is, according to the professor, what is often true about loss leaders? This is basically a detailed question, right? As the ones that I taught you. And basically, what was true about it was that the stores will limit how many loss leaders items each customer can buy. And this is actually true, right? Because there is a particular part in the reading passage. Well, not reading. I always say reading. I don't know why. I think I am traumatized with the reading passages, but it's listening passage, or in a lecture, the professor mentions this, right? That they actually limit how many items of this particular kind you can get when you are a customer, because if they wouldn't be limiting that particular type of good, then they would be losing too much, and they of course do not want to lose any type of money. And the first one, it's correct as well, the fourth one, because they are placed far away from the front of the store. This is something that the professor comments at the beginning of her lecture, right? She says that they are always far away from the front, because if people were just having this particular goods at the front, they wouldn't go to until the end in order to get them, and they wouldn't be seeing nor getting in touch with the rest of products that actually help these stores to earn very much money. Very good. Number 3, why does the professor discuss predatory pricing? In this case, the correct response was number 1, and the student who responded this one got it very well. To explain why loss leaders are sometimes controversial, right? And this is right, because if you remember, whenever the professor talks about predatory pricing, she did it because she was trying to express how so that some stores basically, well, how they stand by whenever they are faced with this particular practice as being, immoral, or as being negative for some customers, or as being something very tricky. They always respond with this particular type of technique, right? But very good, fantastic. We have listened about this in the lecture. What about this one? What is the professor's attitude toward the use of loss leaders by retail stores? This is a personal attitude question, right? As we have seen yesterday. And remember that you can know this by paying attention to the intonation and to the word choice of the speaker. In this case, her opinion was that she feels it can be good for customers and stores. And I remember there was a particular phrase in the lecture when she said that, right? That by this way, using this particular technique, not only stores, but also customers basically end up winning something. That is to say, customers getting goods at the best price, and also, of course, stores selling things at a price that they are comfortable with, right? So given that word choice particularly, I think that you can notice that. And because her intonation during the entire lecture was never something ironical, like, and that is a, terrible practice. Well, although I'm not sure, right? She never expressed herself like that, but she always remained with a respectful intonation, with very much, I would say, well, not admiring, but certainly serious tone and in particular intonation in her voice. And I think that, of course, demonstrates that she was very much conscious about the different benefits of this practice, and she expressed that, right, in her dissertation of this particular topic, right? Number 5, based on the lecture, what can be concluded? This is an inference question about the use of loss leaders. And what could be concluded is that it is a common and effective way of boosting retail sales. And this is true because there is one part in the lecture when the professor mentions, right, that by doing this, retail stores are able to increase their earnings. Although when you think about the loss leader products, they actually lose money when it comes to that particular type of good. But if you make a summary of all they are earning because of the other products that people get in touch with when they are getting to until the back of the store to get the loss products, then of course, if you make an overall summary, you're going to come up with the retail stores always getting a lot of money because of those other products, right? Not because of the lost products, but nonetheless, of course, of the products that people have to get in touch with before they connect, or before they face the ones that the store is actually losing money for. Fantastic. So, and the final question was, the correct response was number 1. She wants the students to understand why loss leaders attract customers to retail stores. And the correct response for this one, although I have to recognize the third one seems very tempting, is that if you remember, the professor says this in the context of having already explained what are loss leaders, right? And she explains that loss leaders is a technique that some stores utilize when they want to attract people without them knowing that they are being somehow, let's say, tricked, and they go to these particular stores because they need to get the most important products at a good price. But nonetheless, when they are always going through that process, they basically face a product that they consider to be attractive, they buy it. So she's explaining basically that the reason why this technique works very well is because people is very much attracted towards good prices, and because they see good prices, right, at the end of the store with these loss products, they always get attracted to this, because although they know that there are some products that are expensive at the front of the store, nonetheless, if they go to the end, they are going to find things that are actually suitable for their pocket, right? So this is the reason why the professor mentions in this particular phrase, that they are always concerned about the price and how affordable some products are. And this is the reason why this technique works very well, right? So this was the correct answer, number 1. Fantastic. So let's continue with another round. Let's listen now to, I think, a conversation, if I'm not wrong, or
Listen to part of a lecture
yes, no, it's a lecture again. So please take your piece of paper again and listen to this one so we can repeat the exercise. Okay, let's go.
a psychology class.
The video we just watched shows chimpanzees responding to a human language, American Sign Language, and also using it. Talking to humans, talking to each other. You even see them talking to themselves. This really says a lot about language. the power, the psychology, the psychological impact of human language.
But the footage all looked really old. Are scientists still doing experiments like that today?
Oh, yeah, there are still lots of experiments being done today where apes, especially chimpanzees, are taught sign language. You're right, though. The examples in the video are older ones from the 1960s and 70s. Psychologists have been trying to teach animals to speak for some time, but that was the first time they really pulled it off. Let's hear some other thoughts on the video.
Well, I guess I was surprised at how comfortable the animals looked, using human language. I mean, they were really into it. It kind of made me wonder, maybe apes have their own sign language? Something like human language that we don't know about.
That's a great point, Todd. And actually, you're right. Chimps do have their own sign language. And we didn't know about it until I'm not sure exactly how recently we discovered this, but not too long ago. Researchers realized that chimps will use their own sign language to talk to each other in the wild. It's simpler than human language, though, and it doesn't have the distinguishing characteristics of human speech. Let's review those. Who can tell me some of those characteristics?
Using a voice, right? Because no other living thing has so much control over the vocal cords, the tongue, teeth, lips.
It's true that most humans can communicate with their voice in a way you don't see other people. Other animals. Other animals use their voice, but they can't make words the same way, voicing them, pronouncing them. But that's not really a necessity in every human language. Remember, Karen, American Sign Language is a human language too. And there are other sign languages. These don't use the vocal cords or mouth, right?
Oh, right. Well, displacement. That's like the ability to talk about things that aren't in the here and now, like talking about what you want to do next week, or what's happening in another country, or what's happening in like a fictional story that isn't even real.
Exactly. And chimps don't do that naturally in their own sign language. Their own signs just communicate their immediate situation. Without being trained by humans, chimps just say stuff like go here, or stop that, or take this. But there's more to a human language.
Maybe chimp language isn't productive in the same way as human language.
You've hit the nail right on the head. I think, but explain what you mean a little bit more.
Well, I remember we discussed productivity before. The feature of language that lets us make, say as many different kinds of things as we want. Because we have so many words, and we can combine them all in these different ways. It sounds like maybe chimps have just a few words?
Right. Without human training, they can only say a few things because their vocabularies are small. And again, wild chimpanzees are also limited in what they can say because they can't talk about displaced topics outside of whatever's going on when they're signing. Now, when they're trained, chimps and apes can use all the features of language. They can tell jokes, talk about the future, and they learn enough words that their language gets really productive. Even with just a 300 or 400 word vocabulary, they can say all sorts of things. I'd still argue, though, that displacement and productivity are uniquely human. These animals have to learn this language use from humans, and they don't reach the level of language complexity that humans do, even after a lifetime of training.
Okay, there you are. Very interesting lecture, right, on biology in this case. But now let's move on to the questions. There we are. Okay, fantastic. So Alessandro sent a message that he was driving, and that was the reason why he didn't manage to respond before. Fantastic. So let us get into the first questions. Guadalupe, you're going to start with this one, okay? So let me just put the chronometer here for you. This is here. So please start responding to the question and reading now. Guadalupe, there you are, please.
Number 3.
All right, number 3. Thank you very much. There you are. Okay, this is going to be for Paulina. Paulina, please. Let's go with this one. All right, there you are. Paulina?
Number 1.
Number 1. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, this is going to be for Lucia. So please, Lucia, start reading and responding this one now. There you are. Lucia, which one would be the correct answer here?
I think that 1 and 2.
Right, 1 and 2. Thank you very much. There you are. Next. Okay, so the first one will go for Natalie. Natalie, please start reading this one and responding now. Okay, fantastic. Nathalie, which one would be the correct answer here?
The third one.
The third one. Thank you very much. Okay. So, Guadalupe, you go again. All right. So please start reading and responding this one. All of you, anyways, take your piece of paper and respond. Okay. Okay. Time's over.
First one.
First one. Fantastic. There you are. And I think this is the last question. Yes. Paulina, please. This one goes for you. There you are, Paulina.
And number one.
Number one. Fantastic. Okay. There we are. So let us have some feedback. Okay. Now, very rapidly before we get into the last material that we're going to examine in tonight's class. Let's see what you have done. All right. All right. And all right. Fantastic. So the first question was, what is the lecture mainly about? In this case, the correct response was number 4, the difference between the use of language by chimpanzees and humans, right? Now, chimpanzees and humans, if you notice, dear students, were the, let's say, the two particular main characters of all this lecture, because right from the beginning, the professor discusses, right, chimpanzees and also discusses humans. She makes comparisons about, for example, how it said that chimpanzees are taught sign languages by human beings and how so that human beings also correspond to these signs by exhibiting particular characteristics that chimpanzees sadly do not have. Now, for example, the third one is incorrect because the discovery that chimpanzees use sign language in the wild, this was just a little part of the lecture because the professor mentioned this at the middle, and she did it just because I think there wasn't a student that actually asked her this, right? I think that somebody said, now I'm wondering, is it possible that chimpanzees actually have their own language? And the professor responded that, oh, yes, that is actually true, right? She said that, yes, chimpanzees actually have been, well, we have discovered that chimpanzees do have a sign language, and this was discovered very recently, right? So as I say, this was something, let's say, spontaneous that came because and the student asked about this, but certainly this was not the main idea because this is not what makes the whole lecture a whole. If you think about it, what connects all ideas, what makes all this lecture understandable is the difference between the use of language by chimpanzees and humans, because how are chimpanzees different to humans and how are humans different to chimpanzees is basically what makes and provokes all discussion, what frames all the information, and that is the correct answer, okay? 2. According to the professor, why are there other examples of chimpanzees sign language in the video's significance? No, excuse me, why are the older examples, not why are there, but why are the older examples of chimpanzee sign language in the videos significant? And the correct answer was that the older videos were made in a time period when scientists first succeeded in teaching human language to animals. Now, this is true, you know, why dear students, because in the lecture, the professor says, I remember this very clearly, she said, right, those videos were made in a time when the scientists started to practice this, right? And she meant basically that those videos that the student, I think, was asked about were videos of chimpanzees that were being taught to speak in sign languages way time ago. Actually, I think the professor mentions a particular time, right? I think she said something like 1960s or 1970s. And she says that at this point, scientists were just starting with this practice, trying to teach these particular animals symbols or sign languages, right? So the correct answer is this one, that these videos were made in a period when scientists first succeeded in teaching these languages. And the first one is not correct. The other videos that chimps use their sign language to talk to each other in the wild. Well, basically, these videos do not show, right, that chimps use their own sign language to talk to each other in the wild, because this is something that actually the professor discusses later. And to the point when she discusses this particular videos at the beginning of the presentation, she never says anything about how so the chimps utilize their own sign language in the wild, although she does it later. But as I say, always pay attention to the question. The question was asking you about the videos, and the videos were mentioned in a part of the lecture where the chimpanzee's sign language was not actually brought to the conversation. So this could not be the correct answer, okay? Very good. Anyways, you were practicing, don't worry, okay? If you have gotten an incorrect response, it's okay. It's better if it happens now, so we can correct the criteria, and later, of course, you're going to prove very much, right? By practicing even more. So what about this one? What is true about the use of voice in human language? No other animals use their voice to communicate in the same way as humans. And use of voice is unnecessary in some forms of human language. So the professor talked about this, I think. As she said, right, no other animals use their voice to communicate in the same ways as humans do. I think that this is something that she said very clearly, almost with the same words. So I think it's not necessary for me to explain it. And the second one, use of voice is unnecessary in some forms of human language. This is something that she also said, right? Because the student at the beginning said, what is important for our language is that we use our vocal cords, but this is not actually true, right? The professor says, but think about, dear student, that we are using actually a lot of languages that are not always requiring the use of our voice. And she gives an example, right? The sign American language is not actually used in voice. So this could not be a characteristic. So the use of voice is unnecessary in some forms of human communication, right? That's the reason why you have sign language and you don't use your voice. The first one, voice is required for the key features of human language to develop, is actually the contrary, right? Because she said that the voice is not actually elementary for our language to exist, because we can express the same with symbols with our hands as we do it in the American Sign Language. And we are number 4. What about this one? What is displacement? This is something that the professor mentions, right, very clearly. The ability to communicate about something other than an immediate situation. She expresses this with the illustration that chimpanzees do not manage to say any other thing apart from their immediate reality, something like, give me that, or don't do that, or please stop, right? So that's the reason why they don't have displacement, because displacement is to have the capacity to express complex ideas or reasonings that have to do with the future, with the past, with things that are even fantastical and not happening in our current and immediate context, right? So the third option is incorrect, a human ability to use voice. In this case, displacement has nothing to do with voice, but with, as I say, the capacity of thinking about situations that are not immediate and expressing them through language, all right? Number 5, what kind of language are chimps capable of, even without human training? And here the correct answer is giving command and orders, because the first one, combining signs to represent new concepts, is not correct, because, right, if you remember, the professor says that they cannot create new things apart from their actual and current situation. So giving commands and orders are actually what they are capable of without human training, because they always have very simple and immediate expressions like give me that, stop, do this, right? and this is what they can produce by their own without our intervention. Okay, the final question. What is the professor's opinion on trained chimpanzees that exhibit displacement and productivity in their language? So these features of language should still be seen as uniquely human because they do not occur among wild chimpanzees. This is something that she says very clearly, right? At the end of the lecture, she says, but I don't think that this should be considered something, let's say, natural for chimpanzees, but it's still human, right? She said that at the end of the lecture, I remind, when clarifying what she thought about this particular process of teaching language to chimpanzees, she said that I consider that this is anyways an ability that is only possible for human beings, right? So this is a correct answer. Fantastic. So let's go and get into the final material. It's going to be a conversation this time. Okay, so let's listen together.
Listen to a conversation between a professor and a student.
Oh, Jason, long time no see. How have you been?
I guess it has been a while. Amazing how time flies. I've been well. You know, graduation's coming up pretty quickly, but I've been enjoying my senior year.
And how's your older sister? Amy?
Amy? She's good. She just got an internship at the Library of Congress. But I don't see her much nowadays. Anyway, I'm kind of coming to you for some specific advice if you have a moment.
Well, my schedule's wide open. What's on your mind?
Okay, so I'm helping out Professor Williams in his Intro to English History class, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I heard that.
He's letting me take over the class one day to teach it, and that's exciting, but I've never designed a lesson before, and I'm kind of embarrassed to go talk to Professor Williams about what I'm planning. He can be a little intimidating.
Oh, don't sweat it. I remember how nerve-wracking it can be when you first get up to teach. So what's the lesson?
Oh, the lesson's going to be on King Henry VIII. Just like an introduction, an overview of his life and influence, you know?
Got it.
So far, I outlined all the ways he's impacted England, both in the Renaissance and today. It seems boring. Here, you can take a look at my lesson plan if you want.
That would help. Well, I do think you've accounted for all the major elements of his legacy, but even glancing at the plan, I don't see any real focus. It looks more like a list.
A list? Yeah, I guess so.
How can I put this? All right, let me just ask you this. What do you think the most important part of Henry VIII's legacy is? I mean, what do you think of his overall stature as a ruler?
What do you mean?
I mean, well, consider his place in history outside of England for a moment. Would you agree that, along with the current Queen Elizabeth II and his own daughter, Elizabeth I, that he's one of the most famous English rulers ever?
Sure. We don't learn nearly as much about kings like William III or Stephen of Blois or Richard II, even in really in-depth history courses.
Exactly. Why do you think that is?
A number of reasons. He was married 6 times. He had 2 of his wives beheaded. He was famously fat by the end of his life. And he went from being a staunch Catholic to, well, defying the Pope and founding his own church. Henry VIII was kind of larger than life.
Exactly. You can paint a really engaging picture with that character. You can deliver the dry facts during the story, but you might want to keep the class's attention with a bit of a flourish, with focus on those over-the-top details. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah. That's a great point. Maybe I should try out the lecture with somebody willing before I have to actually give it, like rehearse so I can tell the story better.
I think that's a great idea.
There you are. Fantastic. So now let us get into the questions immediately. So let us discuss this one together, okay? We're not going to go one by one, but let us discuss together. Why does a student visit the professor? To discuss how to make a potentially dry topic more engaging, to inform her about recent changes in his and his family's lives, to fill in a gap in the student's knowledge of English history, or to complain about the difficulty of an assignment given by another professor. I think that we are very clear that the correct response in this one is the first one, right? How to discuss how to make a potentially dry topic more engaging. This is the reason why she comes to the professor, right? Because he's afraid of having a lecture that is not very much good, or let's say striking for his students to receive it, and that, well, maybe for him could be boring for other people, right? So he's trying to make this not very much boring. So I think this is a correct answer. Let's go with the second one. What can be inferred about William III, Stephen of Blois, and Richard II? They did not rule England for long enough periods of time to have notable impacts. They make an interesting topic for lectures because there's little recorded information on them. They are generally disliked by historians and therefore rarely discussed, or many students are less familiar with them than with Henry VIII, right? What can be inferred about these fellows? What I can tell you, dear students, is that I think that the correct answer in this case would be the fourth one. Many students are less familiar with them than with Henry VIII. And why? I think that the first option, the second, and the third one are not correct, because you cannot actually make an inference, because they never tell you why are they not very much known, right? They just say that the professor asks the student, would you say that would you say that this is that when talking about King Henry, right? Would you say that this is one of the most popular rulers in the history of the European kingdom? And he says, yes, certainly. And it's actually more famous than Stephen of Blois and Richard II and many other people. And I think that the only inference that we can make of that is that many students are less familiar with them than with Henry VIII, because that is what the students said about these characters. He didn't say anything about how much they basically went for the kingdom, or what they did, or what historians thought about them. So I think this is the only possible inference. Number three, which of the following does the student believe is true of King Henry VIII? He's well known primarily for his colorful personality. The details of his life are often exaggerated in stories. He was a cruel man for executing several of his wives, or his legacy continues to shape the politics of contemporary Europe. I think this is the correct one, because colorful personality, not actually. The details of his life are often exaggerated. He never said this. He was cruel for executing. No, I think this was the correct answer, because I think that he said at one point during his conversation with this particular professor, I think, or faculty member from the university, that he considered that he shaped the current European war. So I think this will be the correct one, although I am doubting a little bit on this one. But nonetheless, I think the correct answer will be this one. Let's see, and we're going to check it later. What does the student suggest he should do before giving a lecture? Discuss his lesson plan with another professor, give a practice lecture to polish his storytelling skills, research more dramatic details of Henry VIII's life, or listen to a peer explain the history of Henry VIII for ideas. In this case, is give a practice lecture, right? To make, as he said, a rehearsal, to have somebody volunteering to listen to the class before he delivers it, right? I think this is very clear. He said this very easily during the lecture. And finally, listen again. Okay, so let us listen again to this part so that we can respond.
Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
I'm kind of embarrassed to go talk to Professor Williams about what I'm planning. He can be a little intimidating.
Oh, don't sweat it. I remember how nerve-wracking it can be when you first get up to teach.
What does the professor mean when she says this?
Oh, don't sweat it.
Okay, so don't sweat it. No la sudes, no? No te pongas nervioso. What does the professor mean when she says this? She believes Professor Williams is overly harsh with his students and assistants. She does not think the student's concern is warranted in his situation. She wants the students to feel comfortable asking for her guidance, or she's willing to help the student teach his lesson so it will be less stressful. Yes. No. Feel comfortable asking for her guidance. I think it's the third one, dear students. She wants the student to feel comfortable asking for her guidance, because when you say don't sweat it, right? And later, I think this is after she said to the student that she has time for him to ask her any question. And when she says this, right after he explains the problem to her so that she can give him some particular guidance or things like that. I think the reason why she says this is like, please don't worry. I want you to feel comfortable asking for my guidance, right? Because I know how difficult this could be. Let's see if this is a great answer. Okay, so let's see what we did and if we did it correctly. Yes, fantastic. This was the correct answer. As I told you, she wants the student to feel comfortable asking for her guidance. Why, bro? Because she says, right, don't worry. I mean, I know what it means. I know what it feels, excuse me. I know that this could be difficult. Don't worry. She's basically expressing him that he should be comfortable because this is something normal that apparently she also experienced at some point in her life. What about the other response? Yes, I also got it correctly. What does the student suggest he should do before giving a lecture? Give a practice lecture to polish his storytelling skills. He said this at the end of his conversation. He said that he would be looking for a voluntary to listen to the class, right? What about the other one? Oh, in this case, he's well known primarily for his colorful personality. I think that, as I told you, this was the only one in which I was doubting. He's well known primarily for his colorful personality. Although in this case, of course, the response is super tricky because colorful personality. What do you mean by colorful personality? If the question would have said something like, he was well known for his incredible events or for his incredible actions, or he was well known for being terrible, right? Or ingenious, or let's say controversial, you would have been easy to respond as well. But nonetheless, doesn't matter. What about the other one? This was correct, as I told you. What can be inferred about William III, Stephen of Blois, and Richard II? As I told you, the only correct inference about these people was that they were less familiar than with Henry VIII. That is to say, people did not know very much about these fellows. And the other reason why you can infer that is because the student says, right, they are certainly more famous than, less famous than Henry, because even in death history classes, we are not talked about these characters as we do in the case of Henry, right? So let's see the last one. Why does a student visit the professor? Well, to discuss how to make a potentially the right topic more engaging. And I think it was very clear, right? Because this is the only topic that he discusses, because at the end, although the professor asks him about his sister, he didn't respond. Fantastic. So there we are. Is there any question, dear students? Anything that you could clarify? Any question, dear students? Anything that I could maybe clarify with regard to your doubts? No questions? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so let us stop here then. Tomorrow we're going to continue with this. I'm going to take your assistance. Please don't go. Help me, dear students, please, with the traditional poll that we always fill. Okay, you know that you help me a lot by filling it. So please look at your screen. And now I'm going to take your assistance. Please listen to your name. Where is this? Where's this? Where's this? Where's this? Here. I said that question about his colorful personality. Super tricky, right? Because what do you mean by colorful personality? That was a very a matter of interpretation, because colorful personality I interpret as meaning somebody who made jokes or something like that, and that was never mentioned, right? Your student is going to find this type of questions that are not difficult because they are difficult, but because the way that they are, let's say, asked is certainly very much tricky. That is tremendously difficult to understand what they mean by some things. But when you come with these responses, well, you respond as good as you can. Okay, so is here present Guzman Guadalupe?
Present.
Thank you very much, Guadalupe. What about Sonia Raquel Nolasco? She's not able. Nathalie, not here.
Present.
Thank you very much, Nathalie. What about John Ariel Machaca? She's not here. Grados Lucia?
Present.
Thank you very much, Lucia. What about Reyes Camila? All right, Cami. What about Paulina Jasmine?
Present, teacher.
Thank you very much. And finally, Alexander Christopher. Okay, Alex was here. I know he was here.
Present,
I know Alex
teacher.
was- Yes, thank you very much, dear Alex. Thank you very much. All right, thank you very much, dear students, for your responses. It was a pleasure to be with you, and I'm going to be seeing you next time. All right, in order to continue practicing. So please, I'm gonna see you tomorrow. Okay, have a wonderful night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you,
Have a
teacher.
great
You
night.
too.
Thank you.